What's good, gangsters? I'm gonna go ahead and hit some lower tonight. Got usual with hip abductor, adductor, hip thrust, calf raise. Oh, might help. And then we'll be doing, I believe it's seated leg curl or lying leg curl. I can't remember which one it is. And then leg press. Did a little bit of a refeed today. So our typical carb intake has been right around 300, 315 a day. It kind of fluctuates depending on what I have for breakfast. I cycle between like two different breakfasts on this meal plan here. But right around 300 to 315. Today we've actually had 500 grams of carbs. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm expecting this to be a pretty solid workout. Pump should be pretty decent too. We'll do some posing after the lift to see where we're at, how we're looking, all that kind of fancy stuff. Of course, we'll have the usual 15 minutes of stair stepper after the session, but we'll go ahead and squeeze the posing in before that, give us a little bit of a cool down before that cardio session there. I already did my morning cardio. So I did, what did I do? 5.5 miles. I did 4 of those miles walking. I did 1.5 miles running. I'm not a marathon runner. I'm not trying to sprint a mile or anything like that. I just wanted a leisure pace. My walking speed was, I think, right around 13.5 to 14 minutes a mile. And then my running speed was at like 10 minutes a mile. So nothing crazy. But yeah, we'll have lower today. And should be a pretty decent workout, like I said. One thing I'm getting closer to in this prep is obviously peak week. I'm just about 8 weeks out right now. So it's inching ever closer, obviously. And so what I'm doing today with this refeed, which it was primarily just carbohydrate uptake, is, I'm essentially trying to see what a good number is as far as how many carbs I need to load 1 to 2 days before show. Trying to figure out, what number is going to be pretty decent to, get me fully filled up on my glycogen stores, but not spilling, not looking too puffy or too soft, So this is kind of a test run on that. I want to do one probably again at 3 weeks out or so, just to reassess and see what that number needs to be at. And we'll also, manipulate it throughout peak week and throughout the 2 to 3 days leading up to show day. Doing the weigh-ins, doing the posing, and looking at the visuals too, to be like, okay, after meal 3, I'm sitting at, 355 grams of carbs or whatever it is, and oh man, I still look kind of flat. Maybe I need to bump that up a little bit. Well, then when you get to meal 4, and maybe I'm sitting at closer to like 415 or 430 grams of carbs, whatever it is, and I do the posing and all that kind of stuff, and I'm looking pretty full, I'm looking pretty vascular, and I'm like, okay, this might be pretty good, but I want to push it a little bit further with meal 5 and see kind of what that sweet spot is. Well, maybe I get to meal 5 and I'm at 515 grams of carbs or whatever the number is. I'm just throwing numbers out there just for the sake of the whole experiment here. So we get to that meal, we eat it, and we're like, oh, okay, I look like I spilled. I'm looking a little bit too soft here, a little bit too full. So that right there is going to be the best way to figure out what my carb intake number needs to be at. So we'll do a little bit of that manipulation. Obviously, there will be water manipulation alongside that. Same thing with sodium. But the big one is going to be that carb intake manipulation to figure out what's going to be the best number for me. But, that's why we're doing this right now. So I'm sitting at, like I said, right around 500 so far today. We'll see how that looks. And if it looks pretty decent, we'll keep that in the back of our mind. Okay, 500, I look pretty good. But we'll play around with those numbers too as it gets closer to show. But I'll go ahead and leave you all off there. Like I said, going to go hit some lower, splice in some of the training footage in there, and then some of the posing, and then we'll talk on the drive home. I'll catch y'all in a little bit. Alrighty, we are Dunskies. Workout went pretty well. Little mad at myself though, because I made a rookie mistake tonight. I did not adequately hydrate before my session. And unfortunately, that did lead to a bit of a dip in the gym performance, specifically on leg press. Now, realistically, it might not be all due to dehydration. It might boil down to a little bit of inadequate carb timing, as well as exercise selection order. So I ended up doing my seated leg curl before I did my leg press, which typically that's not much of an issue for me. My hamstrings, they're not really the focus, and they're not the primary mover in a leg press. So you'd think I'd be all right. My hamstrings really wouldn't negate or mess with my leg press sets a whole lot. But that's where the dehydration comes into play here. I felt the onset of a cramp during both of my working sets on leg press. Granted, I'm not going, balls to the walls, crazy, heavy, hardest sets of the world, -2 RPE or -2 RIR, anything like that. We're being a little bit more conservative, leaving 1 to 2 reps in reserve, everything like that, making sure form is good. But realistically, I could have gotten probably another 3 to 4 reps out of the set and still been within the 1 to 2 RIR threshold. But our hamstrings, again, like I said, started to cramp a bit towards the end of my working sets on leg press. So I had to ease off and not go as hard on those sets. So again, rookie mistake, something I should have, better planned. But today was kind of a weird day. I had a lot that happened in the morning that kind of threw off my afternoon. But regardless of that, I still should have planned a little bit better. I should have been on top of my water intake, which I typically am. But today, this morning just threw me off. So I didn't track my water as accurately as I should have. I had like glasses of water here and there, whereas I will typically have my half-gallon, glued to my side with me basically every day, which I did bring that with me to the training session, and I still didn't drink all of that. So again, I was not on top of hydration. But I'm not going to sit here and, harp on myself too bad. I still had a very productive session. I felt like today I really had a good mind-muscle connection to my calves. Which, I mean, that's not an end-all be-all of an amazing working set or anything like that, or that's not going to, unlock the extra 25% of gains or anything like that. But it does help to an extent, if you're actually actively feeling the mechanical tension on the target muscle during your working sets, well, more than likely you're probably putting adequate mechanical stimulus onto that desired muscle. And so that was definitely a good takeaway from this specific workout tonight, alongside my hip abductors. So unfortunately, my SD card did get corrupted the last time around. I trained lower, and when I trained on hip abductor, last time I did hip abductors, I had a little bit of right hip abductor tightness and soreness, so I wasn't able to go nearly as heavy as I typically could, even again working within that 1 to 2 RIR threshold. Tonight, since I did adequate recovery and rehab, we were able to do our typical working set weight, and no issues, no problems, no qualms, and feeling right as rain right now. So that was definitely another good aspect of this session. I did opt out of hip thrust tonight, mainly because honestly, I feel like I have pretty adequate deep hip abductor and adductor development as well as glute development. So that's not really a priority of mine as of right now. I will be hitting it on my next lower day. I'm not going to outright just skip it altogether, because it is still a very, very good machine and exercise, to develop the posterior chain as well as the glutes and a little bit of hamstrings. There's a little bit of hamstrings in there as well. But ended up opting out of that tonight. And then, like I said, calf raises went really well. I am actually going to switch to a new calf raise machine that's kind of been hidden in the forest of the gym here. I never really realized it was an actual calf machine. For the longest time, I thought it was just another shoulder press machine, the way it was set up. But no, it actually has foot pedals. So it almost looks like a go-kart, basically. It's really weird. Like, it has 2 foot pedals. They're omnidirectional, or whatever the fancy term is. I can't think of the actual word off the top of my head. But they pivot and everything, so you can get into like a perfect foot position for your body. And I felt like I got really, really, really good connection on that. I only did mind muscle connection. I only did a set or two with probably 50% of what I would actually do for a working set, because I had never done the machine before, so I mainly wanted to just get a feel for it. But since I have already maxed out the standing calf machine that I have been doing at the gym, I'm going to swap to that one, try that on my next leg day, and see how that goes, because that one also goes up to 400, which the standing calf raise goes up to 400 as well. I'm already able to do 400 plus a 45 plus a 25, and I have no room to add extra weight to that. But on that seated one, it's not a typical seated. You'll see it whenever I actually, record a set on there. It also goes up to 400, and there's no way I'm doing 400 on that anytime soon. So that's perfect, because we have plenty of room to progressively overload on that specific machine and that specific exercise. So that's perfect. So I'm not stalling my calf development. I mean, albeit since I am in a deficit and getting ready for stage and all that kind of stuff, not really going to be seeing much growth at all. Essentially just maintaining what we have. But following, our competition, when we go into our next growth phase, I now have a calf machine that I can utilize, and I'll be able to add some substantial growth and strength onto those. So that's perfect. But I'll go ahead and leave it off there, and I will catch y'all later. Peace.